Thank you very much and welcome back to Race Industry 2021. And Judy, we have a special guest with us today.
Yes, we do, Mr. John Waraniak, and it's good to have you with us today. You're going to be with us twice today.
Yes, this afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and then again at 5 p.m. for our happy hour on focus on off-road and off-road EV racing with Dave Cole and Jake Hawksworth. Going to be cool.
Great. So what are we going to be talking about today, John?
Our first panel is going to focus on the future of racing and performance, and particularly the technology and the role that technology has played in the past, and certainly the role that technology is playing in the future. I like to tell people that EPARTRADE Race Industry Week is the digital twin of our B2B future. Again, not the e-commerce side, but certainly the network and bringing us together virtually so that the racing, as Paul says, is kind of the next generation, if you will, post-pandemic, the next generation, golden age of motorsports.
Oh, you're right. Thank you very much. And coming from you means a lot to us. I mean, when it comes to technology, you're the guy, you know, in the automotive.
well, I try to be, and hopefully it helps with our audience today. And it's great. I think you mentioned we have, what, 110 countries this morning?
Yes, yes.
And how many actual viewers online? Judy, any idea?
I mean, it's because we are basically live here, but we're also streaming so Racer is streaming for us on YouTube and there are different channels. Okay. So really this section, this live section is you have to log in and you have to put your information in. So we have this, and which is actually recorded, and it make available next week to the entire industry. And so the beauty of being live like that and online is the live aspect of it is just the beginning, you know, and there's so much information. Just look in the last few hours this morning, you know, there's so much information in there that it's going to be published later on the EPARTRADE platform and our YouTube channel, and people that couldn't be with us today will have the ability to also watch those.
Absolutely. And I like to tell folks also that, the conventional trade show, as we used to know it for 50 years, is dead. So, but the point is, long live the trade show, because the new trade shows are becoming much more virtual and physical mashing together. And that's what EPARTRADE Race Industry Week is all about. Arguably, most shows have gone from physical to virtual. EPARTRADE Race Industry Week has gone from virtual, and eventually, I imagine some part of it will be physical.
Well, thank you very much, John, for your words of wisdom. And we have your panel on. And what a
excellent! Everybody made it. Good. So everybody's getting ready to get the starting grid ready, and we're going to do a rolling start. Okay, guys?
So, John, you're in charge.
So get your cars. Well, thank you, and thank you, Francisque, and thank you, Judy, and thank you, Paul Fanner, for really putting this show on. This is fantastic. It's a great opportunity. If you look at the A list of speakers, it's basically who's who in motorsports around the world. You know, from Zach Brown, Michael Andretti, you name it, and it's great. And I am actually very honored for the folks that we have on today: Doug Bowles, Stefano DePonte from Dallara, my great mentor and great friend, Dr. Dave Cole, and a new friend, Ricardo Juncos. So we're going to be talking a lot, and so I'm going to jump right into it. And first of all, I want to say good afternoon and good evening to our friends in Europe, and welcome to our session on the future of racing and performance. And we're going to focus on the technology of racing and performance, particularly on what's new, what's now, and what's next. And we're going to go through that with our great lineup of speakers. And again, thank you all for being here. I'm John Waraniak. I'll be your moderator today, and we put this session together. And I want to focus on some of the things that motorsports and racing have always been what I call the gemba, the front line for actual things that are taking place with racing. And it's the front line for basically three things. Racing has basically three key principles. One, solving problems. Two, demonstrating technology on the world stage. And third, inspiring the next generation of STEM and STEAM leaders around the world. And we'll be talking about all that. And more importantly, with the era that we're in, and hot rodders and racers have been a big part of the, I'll call it the era definition, and defined eras for the last 50 to 100 years. We're in a new era here with connected, autonomous, and electrification of vehicles. And that era and attitude will be defined by a lot of the people we'll be talking to today that are online, as well as the next generation. So racing is a big part of our connected, autonomous, and electric future, and we'll be talking about that. I'm going to focus on racing and give a quick overview. I'm going to drive through quite a few slides very quickly, and then I want to get to the panelists, and we'll do a short introduction. Each of them will have 2 to 3 minutes to introduce themselves and any key messages that you want to deliver to kind of spark and get the conversation going among yourselves. Because one thing we've learned at sessions like this, particularly virtual, the audience wants to hear from you, the panelists. You guys are at the Gemba, you're at the front line, as I said. They want to know what's on your minds and share your insights with them. So let me share my screen here and bring up, let's see, where are we at here? Let's get these screens up. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. What do we got here? Let me open this up. Okay, let's see. So can you guys see those slides?
Not yet.
How about that? Let's see. Nope. Back up here. And now that I got that up, let me go back to, I got to go back to share screen. Let's see. Okay, so that should come up. That should come up.
Yep.
And let's see.
You got it.
Yep.
And from the beginning.
Good job.
Okay, you guys can see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool.
All right.
So again,
I see.
welcome to our session, and want to focus on a couple things. You see there, you see actually an IndyCar racer, and you're going to see something new we're going to talk about today, as well as the Indy Autonomous Challenge. The car on the right-hand side of the screen, the left side of the screen, looking at it, is basically the Indy Autonomous Challenge car that was at the Brickyard just last month, and we'll be talking about that. If you think about the systems approach to motorsports, I like to think of the 6 dimensions. We're going to focus mostly on the equipment today, the technology, but it does impact all those other 6 dimensions that you see in that systems model there. Again, I mentioned racing is about 3 things: solving complex problems, particularly extreme edge cases, demonstrating technology, pushing innovation, and pushing proof of concepts out to the world, and certainly inspiring the next generation of leaders. The talent pipeline we'll be talking about today as well. And again, I mentioned the defining the eras and attitudes. Connected autonomous vehicles and electrification are part of our future, racing playing a big role in that. But unfortunately, the complexity is actually outpacing our ability as an industry to manage it. So we have to manage this disruption and complexity. Software and safety performance and digital vehicle architectures are the new horsepower. We're going to talk about that as well. And certainly generative design, additive manufacturing, or 3D printing, if you will, and digital twins make the impossible possible. We'll be talking about how it does all that as well. I mentioned the Indy Autonomous Challenge. History was made, and there's a moment when the impossible passes into history. That was October 23rd at the Brickyard. Doug was there, Stefano was there, Ricardo was there. It was truly history being made with the first autonomous cars to run at the racing capital of the world, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The team that won the $1 million prize was Germany's Technical University of Munich. It was great to see that, although it didn't transpire into a on-track car-to-car competition. That's actually going to take place at CES, Consumer Electronics Show, on January 7th. But really cool, it plans, as Michael Andretti said, you always have to have a plan B and a plan C. Well, Paul Mitchell and the great folks at ESN, the sponsors, and Cisco, they had a great plan B, and the race was underway. It happened very well. And the next car-to-car race will be at Las Vegas Motor Speedway on January 7th. So looking forward to that. This seems new to a lot of people. It should not. A lot of the connected autonomous vehicles technology started in racing. That was me back in the 90s with Don Runkle and a few others, and Dave Cole remembers them. We did the first connected automated vehicle demonstration outside La Jolla in San Diego, where we embedded electronic sensors in the freeway, and we had 8 autonomous Buicks. Why Buicks were chosen, I have no idea. But The Buicks were actually hands-free. There's actually a video you can look at online on that, with the drivers with their hands up. They are autonomously driven and connected through the freeway for 15 miles. But it was a start, but that was a long time ago, maybe ahead of its time. But a lot of that technology came directly from racing and GM racing in particular. So that came together and it really did manage that disruptive technology. The other big part we'll talk about today as well is the impact of safety, motorsports and racing on safety. Not only on race cars, like you see Ryan Newman's there in his crash last year, but think about the crashes and the fires. Romain Grosjean, the fire in F1 last year. Think about that. And not to mention Tiger Woods is in the news again today. When he crashed last February, the very first thing the LA County Sheriffs wanted to take a look at was the black box, the event data recorder. And that has saved a lot of lives for accident reconstruction, making race cars for a lot of our race car drivers safer, but certainly the cars we have in our driveways, not to mention the Halo devices, the Hans device, everything that we're seeing with ADAS, the advanced driver assist systems, and all sorts of those things that have been developed through racing and applied to the vehicles we have in our driveways that we're driving, and more importantly, our families and friends are driving as well. So we've got a fantastic speaker grid here today. So the lineup, these are again, what I'll call the frontline industry leaders, experts, and visionaries. We got Doug Bowles, president of Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Thank you, Doug, for being here. Glad to have you. And Ricardo Juncos, president and team principal of Juncos Hollinger Racing. Thank you for being with us, Ricardo. And Stefano DePonte, the CEO and general manager of Dallara USA. Stefano, good friend, great to have you with us. And Dave Cole, as I mentioned, chair emeritus of Center for Automotive Research, Auto Harvest as well. And something we'll be talking about as well, that talent pipeline, is building America's tomorrow. And Dave is an expert at that and a lot of things that he's doing at that. So I'm going to turn it over to you first, Doug.
Can you please call in?
And I'll take the slides off. We'll kick off with Doug, and each of the speakers will have, as I said, a 2 to 3 minute introduction to themselves and any key messages that they want to kind of seed the audience and seed the other panelists for the discussion that we'll be having. So I'll turn it over to you, Doug.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for everybody for joining us today. Pretty excited to be part of this. We had an opportunity to be part of this previously, and I just want to say thank you to everybody at EPART for continuing to keep the motorsports industry connected, even in the challenging last couple of years we've had. This has become something I think we all look forward to, an opportunity to hear from our colleagues and others in our space as we continue to navigate through COVID, but as we continue to move forward through motorsport. And John, I think you touched on it really well, and I can go all the way back to 1909 when the Indianapolis 500 was created. Our sport isn't just entertainment. I mean, that's a lot of what we do, but we really are driving technology. We are on the front end of some of these use cases that are really trying to find what is the next way to move people and move product around the world through the technology that we're learning in racing, whether it is something that directly comes from an NTT IndyCar, through fuel mileage that Honda and Chevy learn, or through something like the Indy Autonomous Challenge that without Ricardo and Stefano, we wouldn't have had an opportunity to do. It's pretty neat to be on the panel with both of them, because when ESN came to us with this crazy idea of having an autonomous challenge race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Dallara and Stefano were the first to step up and say, hey, we've got a great platform that'll work really well for that. And we knew that the most important thing about that for those universities was to make sure that everybody had exactly the same race car, so that it wasn't about tuning a race car. It was really about having a race car that was identical for everybody, and then allowing the universities to compete on the technology that was going to drive those cars autonomously. And we reached out to Ricardo, who has an awful lot of success in the feeder series, as well as running the Indianapolis 500, but certainly in the Indy Lights series, and presented all of those teams with a platform that was equal. And we were pretty excited at Indianapolis to be part of that. When we had an opportunity to do that, we really thought about 1909, and Carl Fisher built the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to test the new technologies of the day back then, which was the automobile. And so we felt like, in a lot of ways, the Indy Autonomous Challenge was really using the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for something that Carl Fisher built it to do, which was test that new technology. So we were pretty proud to be part of it. We're also pretty proud of the fact that Paul Mitchell and the team at ESN are going to continue that program on forward and ultimately get to a point where those cars are going to run side by side. If you think about what our facility has done over the last several years, our focus on innovation has really been around driver safety and facility safety. So the Safer Wall originated here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway with the University of Nebraska, and that's obviously become something that you see at tracks around the world. Safety in terms of the way that the safety cell working with the LAR to make sure that our drivers are safe during impacts, and then all the technology that comes off those cars when there's an impact so we can continue to make them safer. So to be able to get back in a new technology that had really nothing to do with our sport and help advance autonomous was something we're pretty proud of. And it was really neat to see those universities compete. Our local university, Purdue University, unfortunately didn't win that, but we were pretty excited for the folks at Munich to take home that $1 million and be part of it. But thanks for having me on. There's a whole bunch of things, John, you touched on really well that are really important to our sport. And the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is just proud to be part of this community and helping continue to make sure that the Speedway and racing is more than an entertainment, but we are making a difference in lives for those folks that are in transportation across the board.
Absolutely. And we'll be talking about the mobility future and again, the role that racing has played and will continue to play. I think some of the listeners, and I'm sure all you guys remember that there was a program called the DARPA Challenge, the Urban Challenge, which was 15 years ago. And that was basically, a science experiment to see what autonomous vehicles could do. That spawned an entire new age, if you will, a new era for automobility that we're all part of today, and certainly the resurrection of Detroit. And we'll be talking about that as well. So very cool stuff. And again, 21, I think what universities formed 10 teams from 9 countries around the world. And we're going to see a lot more involved in that, certainly the leaders that we talked about. So thank you, Doug. I'm going to switch over to you, Ricardo. So tell us a bit about yourself and some of the key things that we want to talk about today in our panel discussion.
Well, thank you, John, first of all, to have me here. I'm very excited. And this is my first time, but it's really good to be part of this and to share with you guys a little bit of myself as well, how we ended up being also involved in autonomous. Pretty much, I came from Argentina, so I have all this background in motor racing. My dad used to race cars back in the late 60s and early 70s. I was born in 75, actually, after he stopped racing himself, but I continue his path, and it's been a family, let's say, way to live, right? Motor racing. A lot of people know my story. I came here in 2002 from Argentina after race myself, Formula Renault and prototypes. Originally we were 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's been almost 20 years now in February next year that I'm here in this country, continuing living a dream, right? I pretty much lost everything in Argentina, so I'm here and we grow as we go. Pretty much everybody knows about Junco Racing and the story about the road to India, how we starting go-karts and grow through the ways with the drivers and get to Indy 500 in 2017 and what we're doing actually today as well on motor racing. But I guess Doug covered pretty much everything, and Paul Mitchell coming with also kind of what I thought was a crazy idea to build this Indy Lights race car to become autonomy racing, which was something that I was originally like skeptic to think. I mean, that for me, motor racing is always the sport, the driver, the human being is behind, right? That's why we talk about safety and all this the reason why, because there is a human being inside the car. And now you're talking about something like it's totally autonomous, working with the technology. So for me, it was obviously a big challenge. I like the challenge in my life in general. Speaking, I always went through a situation that I don't even know how I'm gonna enter to something that I don't know what it is, and we never know the outcome. On October 23rd, actually, when we had the event in Indianapolis with the autonomous event, was a lot of pressure, to be honest, because there is a lot of things that we don't know that are outside the normal racing, which is all this technology, right? But we took it in a racing board, right? So for me, it's a race car that we gotta build equally, like Doug was explaining, to make sure all the race cars are exactly the same, so the universities can compete in a fair way, right? So the difference should be only the software or whatever they do with this AI technology to develop this logarithm and the car actually eventually drive themselves. So we focus a lot to build the car absolutely equal for all of the universities. And at that point, for us, it's just another race car that we have to build. But then you start interacting with the universities and the students and how they spend hours and hours in front of computers developing this software. And then you start looking the shape of the car. Inside the car actually is full of computers and batteries and cables and sensors and things that I don't know the name of probably 80% of those things. And the only good thing is that we have a driver that doesn't talk. That's actually an advantage compared to the real racing world. But was very excited to see as we move forward with the ESM people and the Clemson University and all the students, what actually ended up being this final event on October 23, where actually we see our cars that we build with our hands running by themselves in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And for us as a team, like again, coming from Argentina at the beginning without knowing what I'm gonna get into, kind of in general speaking in life, and being part of something like this was huge. But I think this is just the beginning. Like you mentioned the 1997 cars, but I think we make a huge step forward now. You mentioned that first time in history, probably something like this. And I think that I would like to think that this can be treated like a extreme situations where you can have a laboratory to develop this technology, right? That eventually can be applied for safety in general, but in racing itself and our life in the cities, when the cities became autonomous in the future, that can be something that you can develop through this type of racing. But the other side that you have these students to compete. So they compete to the prize, the $1 million prize, and there is no human being in the car. And I think because of that in the future, they will raise to a level that is gonna be so high. And because of that, the technology will be so quick developed, right? I think that's what I like to believe. This is the beginning of something that can be really, really quickly ramped. And then we can use this technology probably to create type of racing in that way, but I don't believe that will obviously replace the sport itself, which is by the human being and the real race car driver. But clearly we can develop some technology by doing the autonomous races, and that you can apply for real racing, Formula One, IndyCar, any class in the planet that can increase the safety for the drivers, maybe more excitement. Who knows where technology is gonna drive us? Clearly we are in this new world that the technology is advancing so quick that nobody can deny that, right? So I think that's the way we took it. We fell into this, and I love that we did it. I'm very proud of the whole team that we put together, of people to build this car, to get this done. And like you mentioned, now January 7th, we're gonna be racing in Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So very excited about that. And we'll see, like I said, this is the beginning of something that can be huge for the world, right? General speaking, and for us to be part of something like this is very exciting.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ricardo. And let me be perfectly clear. I'll speak for Stefano and Doug and Ricardo here that the Indy Autonomous Challenge is not about taking the driver out of the loop. There'll always be a Takuma Sato, a Scott Dixon at the heart of racing. This is about solving extreme edge cases. I jokingly called the cockpit at the challenge at the Brickyard Colton, because just a few weeks before, Colton was leading the Laguna Seca IndyCar race, and a rabbit ran across the track. And I remember some of the teams I mentioned. I said, "Well, do you have an extreme edge case in your algorithms if a rabbit runs across the track at the speedway?" And they said, no. So the point is, it's not about taking the driver out of the loop. It's about solving extreme edge cases. And let's just suppose that years from now, there's an AV51 chassis, Stefano, with Juncos Racing, and Ricardo's driver shows that you can do 285 miles an hour laps at the speedway. The data alone from that, without a driver, is invaluable to the drivers and teams, of knowing the physical capabilities of that car going around the track at those speeds. So those are the types of things that I think we can, who knows what doors will be open. So thank you, Ricardo. And we'll talk more about that. So up next is Stefano DePonte from Dallara, USA. And again, another part of the Indy Autonomous Challenge, but a whole lot more of racing as well. So Stefano, please tell us about yourself and some of the things you want to talk about.
Hi, John. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for having me. Briefly, and a brief introduction, I am a general manager and CEO of Dallara USA, which is the only Dallara outside Italy. I moved to Indianapolis back 20 years ago, basically despite my accent. I'm also a foreigner like like Ricardo. Originally, I'm from Monza, so basically Monza is a sister city of Indianapolis, and they both this city, they do have obviously historically a great legacy and tradition of racing. So I'm proud also from this fact. I used to say that I keep hearing when the cars are running at the speedway, I hearing the noise, and the same thing when I'm back with my family in Monza. So basically the same emotions. I've been in racing basically all my life. I'm not capable to do anything else outside racing. Even if my great passion of history, US history now, led me to study history here in Indiana University. I'm pursuing a PhD in history. So this is my hobby besides racing. And you know, from Formula One and other categories I done before in my life, finally I always look at the US, in particular racing in US, as my dream. I never had a chance to come to this country before for this occasion, and then finally Dallara gave me the opportunity back in 2001, and I never hesitate a second. I left the job I was doing, and I did jump on the train, and here I am. Talking about the event we had in October with autonomous, obviously I will keep separated to the opinion I got. Obviously, talking about the company I do represent, Dallara, we pay very much attention to technology, innovation, that's serving our designing on the cars and other products we made for safety, performance, and so forth. So basically, for the company, has been a huge opportunity to be part of it in terms of an engineering company like we like to be named, and we like to be known. Besides race cars and automotive consultancy, we also are, as you know, in defense and aerospace technologies. So basically, for us, it's been a great opportunity to know, or at least to start to know, a word that basically was partially unknown to us. Even if we got some consultancy back in Italy, working with the companies and OEM, they're obviously with the electrical vehicle, for instance, the Formula E that we design, as well as some consultancy in autonomous. But when we had the opportunity, and I remember back in the days when Matt Peak and Paul came to the office and talk about this idea, it took me a while to digest it, honestly. Being a traditional racing car guy, I needed some time to think about it. But then also with the help of Doug, obviously, and Mark Miles, they were also directly involved since the beginning. I built up and I did convince myself that it was a great opportunity for the company to learn something new, to take advantage of this technology and take it to an exasperation performance, something that maybe nobody wanted to do it, because it did require some, I would say, some courage. Mm-hmm. That becomes my similarity to drivers and to courage. Obviously, drivers in this case, they are university. They were the drivers. They took those cars out and around then at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And in order to do that, because it was the first time ever, they needed some kind of passion, engineering passions, and also some kind of element to dare something new for them. It could be a failure, could be a success. I think it was a successful event. And going back to what Doug was mentioned before, he mentioned Carl Fisher of the Speedway. So that's basically, we linked or we built up a bridge back to history, back in the days, with what the ideology and the purpose that Mr. Fisher wanted to have with the IMS and building up a racetrack like Indianapolis Motor Speedway, starting from the legacy and tradition of racing. And they ended up open up a new door of innovation and technology in October with those cars and those universities that competed in a challenge. Another interesting thing that I was really amazed to be part of it and obviously to watch was the audience. The people that were at the Speedway, the people they were following. I share some numbers with Paul. The event through the social media, the networks, it was unbelievable from the importance of the names, importance of the industries, and the importance of the academic world. And I think this event did like a tools to put this element and this work together in one day. Obviously, a lot of experience and a lot of dedication working the day before to achieve what it was done and what we were able to achieve. But it's not easy to have an event, a sporting event like that, because obviously the sports was a big part of it. That on the same times include the participation at institutional level. Let's remember the state of Indiana played a big role to make this event happen with the governor and his team. The numbers of the industries, the universities, the participants, and obviously the engineering company and the team and the IMS with Doug and Ricardo. So I think that day has made a history. Again, it got nothing to do with the traditional way of racing that we all love, and we all. Dallara was born actually this year. Next year we celebrate 50 years in the racing world, so we were proud to do that. Especially racing is part of the Dallara DNA. So, but also as an engineering company, we love challenges, we love innovation, we love technology, we love everything that can produce entertainment as well as enhance safety and encourage another new type of mobility.
Yeah, we want to talk about that. Very good. Well, thank you, Ricardo. And 20 years later, welcome to the US. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Since you've been at Dallara for 20 years. And the next gentleman on our panel is Dr. Dave Cole. And actually, Dave's father, Ed Cole, I never had a chance to meet the man, but he was the father of the small block Chevy. Lots to do with racing. And Dave's got stories of racing, the racing greats coming over in his basement when racing was not acceptable to go racing at General Motors and Chevy back in the day. So please welcome Dave Cole. And Dave, tell us a bit about yourself and what we want to talk about.
Well, great to be with you guys. And John, we go back a long ways when we both had dark hair. So that was the past, but it's a real pleasure to be a part of this. I've always been a big race fan. Of course, when I was a kid, we all kind of raced on the street informally, but I've always been a fan, but never officially engaged in a racing life. And I did teach vehicle dynamics and internal combustion engines in Michigan. My research was on engine technology, and I do remember the small block when it was developed. In fact, it was fun to drive cars back then when I was a kid, and I had a whole string of Corvettes, and it was sport. But I've been around the block a long time. For example, I was at the first race at Daytona. In fact, it was very interesting. After the race, they had sort of a special event, and the Blue Angels had flown over, and we went to this very nice event, and the Blue Angels walked in, and every woman in the crowd said, "How can I ditch this guy and go with one of those Blue Angels?" I drove the track at Sebring one time, again, many years ago in the last century. And I was at Indianapolis with Maury Rose and a couple of other kids that really appreciated the chance to hear what a real driver did at an amazing course like Indianapolis. But we're in a very interesting period right now. And one of the important things about racing, we kind of talked about it a bit, is that competition drives innovation. And one of the most important things that we can do now is really move technology, innovation forward in a positive way, because we have an extremely unusual period. Whether we think about the virus and electrification, huge talent shortage that is developing, in fact, in manufacturing. If you look at the pipeline of people, we're going to be out about 3 million appropriately educated people short as the boomers retire. And this is a big deal. Materials, the whole issue of electrification, it's a big deal. And of course, one of the most important aspects of what's happening today is the politics and the diversions that we have seen because of politics. And when you look at both electrification and autonomy, the political dimensions of both of these are extremely significant and are going to be a part of the future. And I think probably one of the most important aspects of racing and all of the different forms of racing, whether we're talking about Indy cars or stock cars, is the innovation that is supported by this. As humans, we're naturally competitive. We race on the track personally, we race on the track with cars. And one of the virtues of participation in competition is that we're really improving the world for the other people that are in that world. And this is one of the things that most people don't think about with respect to auto racing, is how much innovation really is derived from that. Because what you do in racing, you're pushing the envelope, you're trying new things, you're exploring things that most people wouldn't even think about, but that's where you develop the winners and the new technology that is so important. And that's a really big deal. And I think that we should never lose sight of the fact that what we're doing as a part of the racing community is we're bringing innovation. And when you look at autonomous technology and electrification, and already we've seen some competition in that area, that's very important. And all of you need to be credited for the important role that you play in terms of competition and the auto sector.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dave. Yeah, a lot of great stuff to talk about. And I'm going to jump on that electrification. And actually, it's where electrification is, the state of electrification in the auto industry. This is the first time, for example, in Ford's 118-year history, that they're going to be spending more on electric vehicles next year than they have on internal gas combustion engines. So think about that from a tipping point perspective. So Ford in 2023 will be spending more on electric vehicles than internal gas combustion engines. And if you go back to Henry Ford's first race 118 years ago on Grosse Pointe here in Michigan on the ice, that is as different. What he did was as different as the Indy Autonomous Challenge. If people, as Henry Ford used to say, basically, if he had asked people what they wanted back then, they would have said a faster horse. They didn't want the internal gas combustion engine vehicle. So with that said, we're going to on the electrification. So this goes out to all of you, and we'll go circle back to you first, Doug. The role that electric, and particularly the bridge to getting their hybrids, and what we're going to see, for example, at the Speedway and in the series. And it's good to know that basically when the day Roger bought the series and the Speedway was the day we introduced the Indy Autonomous Challenge at the SEMA show. Stefano was there. We introduced it to the student luncheon that day, and look how quickly it came together, and look where we are today. So Doug, what role do you see these technologies playing at the Speedway?
Well, I think all these technologies are going to be really important, obviously, for the OEMs and for our own daily vehicles, but certainly for racing as well. You know, I think back to Wilbur Shaw, who was one of our first 3-time winners of the Indianapolis 500 and ultimately brought Tony Hallman to the table to buy the Speedway from Eddie Rickenbacker. And if you've read his autobiography, he talks about how in the early teens, the 19 teens, he fell in love with the automobile and became an automobile salesman. And he started out selling battery-powered cars in the teens. And so the battery and electrification have been around for an awful long time. But back then, he realized that by the time he lightened his car up the most he could, the best he could get out of a car was about 50 miles an hour. And he realized if he wanted to go really fast, the internal combustion engine was the way to go. But those were the seeds 100 plus years ago that we're seeing turn into fruits today. And I think it's really important. So the NTT IndyCar Series is starting to look at hybrid technology and how they can slowly get that involved in our day-to-day competitions. If you were to call up Roger Penske's office in Detroit today, Penske Automotive has a huge effort around electrification. They have more electric-powered semi-trailers on the road today than just about any other company in the world. They work with other huge brands to try and figure out how that technology works and how it's going to impact us. So this is something that Roger Penske, who understands the automobile and understands the automotive industry, understands is going to be very, very important in the future. So I do think you're going to see that. You know, we do an awful lot of work with OEMs here. So Chevy comes out and they do a thing called Chevy Finding Roads, where they bring vehicles out and they put their dealers and their salespeople in them. Those hybrid vehicles are really important. When Porsche and Ferrari have been here for their events, same thing, an opportunity to be involved in those hybrid vehicles. And as you just touched on, with Ford spending more money on the electrified car than the internal combustion car going forward, I think we're going to see this change very, very quickly. And as the OEMs go, so will the motorsport field go. And we may be not right with them, but I certainly think you will see more and more electrification involved in our sport, not just IndyCar or F1, but in our sport across the board.
Absolutely. And we heard from some of the other speakers yesterday and today on the EPARTRADE Racer program video series we're doing, particularly from, talking about Formula E and Extreme E, particularly Michael Andretti. And he made a statement that was very profound, and Michael did. And he said, when he pitches new sponsors or current sponsors about where they're going and the value of Andretti Motorsports to them, he said when he brings up the point of his electrification projects, Formula E and Extreme E, that's when they lean in and want to listen, the non-endemic and the endemic sponsors. So that gets their attention. They want to do what Mark Rushbrook says from Ford, is they want to identify with the brands and the technologies consumers do with what they see on the track. So Ricardo, some of those things that, with your new program and the Juncos Hollinger Racing, obviously some of these technologies that you're sharing with Chevrolet in IndyCar, the fans want to identify with those Juncos Hollinger cars.
Yeah, I think it's a natural way, right, to grow. Like Doug was saying, electricity was actually 100 plus year behind us, but clearly there is a huge new way to do things. And I think we all need to understand that and be open to the new technologies, right? And grow and learn and learn from this and use some of the technology as we discover those in the real world, meaning safety, meaning, I don't know, police cars, ambulance in our normal life, racing cars. But I think also it's a lot of questions or doubts about the real racing versus this electrical racing. Like you mentioned Formula E, which is actually driven by a driver. Originally have 2 cars per driver, which is actually really, really accurate, right? That you try to put the opposite at IMSA, you have like a Durham race, 3-4 drivers per car. In the original Formula E was 2 cars per driver because the battery couldn't last longer. I think we need to be open to all this technology and apply, like Doug was saying, because it's happening, will happen, will continue. We're going in that direction. And for us as a team, right, we looking for performance all the time. We're going to be racing in IndyCar, like you said, with Chevrolet next year full time. And IndyCar is so competitive, it's so difficult. So you take this sport side like any other sport, because at the end of the day, motor racing, the way we do it, is a sport. The race car is driven by a human being that needs to be training, fit, and proper nutrition and mental side, all that. But the competition goes to so high level that everything counts. So when you can find some technology through computers or software or data that you can apply to gain performance, I mean, why not, right? So year past was carburetors and spark plugs and probably a little bit more mechanical side. And today is electronics and software. But at the end of the day, we're looking for the same thing. So I think the behind the scene, the spirit is the same. right? We still live in this sports side, which is what actually the fans go to the racetrack to see a race, to see someone passing someone else, and only one driver is going to win. So when you take 33 cars on the Indy 500, only one is the winner. No one will remember number two, right? Or never mind the rest. So the difference to become that winner or not, when you finish like, side by side and you want to race by 1,000 of the seconds, how much faster number two driver needs to drive through the 500 miles to be the winner and take all the prize? Almost nothing. So that tells you that the attention to details and all this technology play a big role, that more and more. It's excited. I think it's hard to see how it's going to be this in 20, 50, 30 years from now, right? But clearly it is happening. And for us to be part of this is quite excited, to be honest.
Absolutely. When you think about the technology, and we've talked, pure electrification or electrification with a powertrain, certainly, but electrification has been a big part of racing for years. Push to pass, the curves, kinetic energy recovery systems, things like that. A lot of electronics and software, and a lot of people would agree that software and digital vehicle architectures, as we mentioned earlier, that is the new horsepower. And it's more becoming not so much horsepower wars, but kilowatt wars. The acronym WTF that we all know, and it's not what you think. It's basically watts to freedom, if you will, thanks to GM. How do you take a 4.5-ton vehicle like the EV Hummer and have it go from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds? I mean, that's pretty impressive. That's a lot of technology going on there. So Dave, and with some of these technologies that you've seen through the years and racing's impact on them, what do you think will be some of the things we'll see in racing in the next year or two and make their way into production very quickly?
Well, I can tell you that I'm very concerned about the push that we're seeing to electrification. It's being driven more by politics than what I would call systems thinking. Systems thinking says you never look at a detail outside of the context of the bigger picture. And we have been doing that. And ultimately, it's going to be based on the economics of what the average person views this. In fact, if you think of the average American voter, that individual is not thinking about an electric vehicle. And if the economics, whether it's the electricity or the cost of the vehicle, becomes something out of context with what they're interested in, there's going to be a real problem. And we've seen too much politicization of the EV up at this point. And when you begin to look at the details, whether it's charging time, cost, the economics, the materials, the lithium and the other materials, what we're seeing is a dramatic increase in price, where those materials come from. Right now, I would say I'm not against electric vehicles, but based on what I am seeing is I don't see them making economic sense for the average American for quite a while. And that could have an enormous political impact at the next election with how aggressively Biden and his people are pushing the daylights out of electrification. But they're only considering part of the equation, not the whole thing. And when that average American voter, if they see the economic impact on their lives as negative from electrification, we're going to see a reversal very quickly in the direction. Again, I'm not against electrification, electric vehicles. I've driven many of them. They're fun to drive, but the economics have to work for the average person. And right now that is not the case.
Yeah, the price of the Hummer, what, 110, 120,000 bucks.
Well, that's kind of a different deal. There's supposed to be 60,000 people that are serious, want to buy it. But you have to realize that the average person is not even thinking about an electric vehicle. The people that buy them are generally the wealthy, the people that have particular focus on, we've got to eliminate greenhouse gases. And they don't think about where that power is generated, or the materials that are involved in the batteries, or all of the other issues that have not been appropriately considered in a public way. And so I think we could see some very interesting activity related to electrification, not moving quite as fast as people have anticipated it.
Yeah, I wonder if, again, with EV racing, and we'll be talking about that at the next session later this evening, particularly EV racing at King of the Hammers, off-road EV racing. Some of the things happening there, because IndyCar and off-road racing are probably the two hottest lifestyle sports coming, that are generating that, and certainly the excitement of IndyCar. But Stefano, you've taken your knowledge and new knowledge that you create through racing, and I saw at your shop just back last month that you've applied it to like the seats at SpaceX. So you've taken racing technology into new marketing segments like aerospace.
Yeah, absolutely. This is believe it or not, the world of aerospace, defense, and aviation technology and racing, automotive is all correct. Actually, there are more industries, even at the highest level, they're looking at in the racing world in order to do experiments, in order to test components that they are already tested in racing, because let's remember, we work under two elements here in a traditional racing, that we take everything to the exasperations, so as far as the materials, as far as the cars components, and after a race, and you can compare a different kind of racing between Formula One, IndyCar, and so forth. I mean, IndyCar, you see that the technology adopted when we designed this vehicle, it has to last almost forever. I mean, you don't look at the competitions, you don't look at the as far as the designer manufacturer. I mean, we designed the car robust. We designed a car that must race in any different kind of typology of racetracks. And obviously, most importantly, it must be a safe car. This industry is, they're looking into the racing because they see us as a testing world. I mean, with all the components that we do, that we design, including obviously the electronics. And that's why the transfer of technology between the racing world, the automotive world, with aviation technology and aerospace, it comes under these terms quite easy. And obviously another component that this is more on, I would say, on a logistic aspect more than engineering and a technical side. I mean, you're ready or not, the race starts tomorrow at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or whatever time. So you must respect the time, you must respect the scheduling, you must respect the way you do delivery stuff. And if you don't, that's, the race, believe it or not, they start without you. So that's another aspect that those industry love and like to work with industry. They do have a DNA in racing and in automotive, just because of the way we deliver stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I want to quickly touch upon, I mentioned managing the complexity of vehicles today, racing and production vehicles. The average car today has 2,000 microchips, which the industry cannot get anymore, and about 100 million lines of software code, which is much more complex than a race car. And so the average race car, an F-150 or F-35 Raptor has about 2 to 5 million lines of code. Boeing 767, 5 to 10 million lines. So only 10% of that software in those vehicles. So in a race car and in racing, you guys all know this, it's, with that complexity becomes potential failures. So how can we use racing to manage this disruption of all these things coming together on today's vehicles and help the OEMs, if you will, by demonstrating that these systems can be well thought out and be reliable, and the consumer can understand them, whether it's safety, raceability, or some of the environmental stuff. Let's go back to you, Doug. What do you think?
Well, I think one of the great things about our sport, really from the very beginning, is the ability to solve those problems and solve them in a very extreme case. And that was part of the reason the Indy Autonomous Challenge was so attractive, is that it wasn't just about creating a vehicle that could go from point A to point B, but it was about creating a vehicle that could go from point A to whatever point it was, whether it was going to be the 100 miles or what it ultimately ended up being, while at the same time being able to deal with obstacles that were in the way and things that were outside of the scope that you didn't know that were going to happen. So I think that's really where racing will continue to come into play. It's going to come into play because you're going to take some of the smartest folks around, some people that are entrepreneurs that didn't fit the mold of one of the big automotive companies, but have the brains to solve those problems and do it through teamwork and in those extreme use cases. And I think that's why, why our sports continue to thrive, because you have some of the best and brightest in the sport. One of the things I liked about the Indy Autonomous Challenge wasn't so much what happened on the track, but it introduced a bunch of really bright young students who were in graduate school, who came to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first time often, maybe had never even really heard of anything other than the Indianapolis 500, but didn't even know what it was. But to bring those folks to Indianapolis, to Indiana, to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I think is great for our sport, because some of those students, I think, will end up in our sport, helping our sport, whether it's in IndyCar or some other form of it, continue to grow, and maybe not in the autonomous way, but certainly in the technology side of things. So I do think the sport will continue to be the test ground and have to deal with a lot of the challenges that the OEMs will deal with. I do want to just circle back on one real quick thing that I think Ricardo mentioned. That, I mean, I'm a promoter. I don't ever want to see racing here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for an Indy 500 without drivers. What makes our racing so special is the driver machine component, man and machine working together. I do think there's a lot of technology that we learned even in October that could ultimately make racing safer and deliver more information to our drivers. But what makes it so spectacular are the men and women who strap those race cars on their backs and run 240 miles an hour with 32 other cars into turn one, trying to win at 500 miles. So the promoter in me says, man, I love the internal combustion sound. I love the internal combustion smell. There's so much of that piece that I think makes the entertainment side. But as the world changes, I think you will see our sport adapt to change alongside of it, and we'll be leading and testing some of those challenges that the industry will face.
Absolutely. We're kind of winding down here, and I want to go back to a statement. It was actually your CEO from Italy, Stefano, from Andrea Prontamoli. And he said, and again, this is what every racer needs to know, in particular our EPARTRADE listeners, manufacturers and suppliers out there, that these are opportunities for you to use racing and to develop your products. And I'm not talking about a simple business plan. I'm talking about a technology roadmap that ties your capabilities and competitive advantages to these types of trends that we've been talking about, particularly in the technology trends, because technology makes and moves markets, like it or not. And those markets will move, and you have an opportunity to take advantage of those. If you're not prepared, you're not going to be part of that future. So Andrea made a very profound statement, and he said that basically in racing, you have two choices. You can win, but if you don't win, you can choose to learn. So this is kind of the setup for our last question, if you will. And this is our white flag lap, and Doug knows this well. So think about it, from the audience perspective. And if Carl Fisher was in the audience, or Henry Ford, or Louis Chevrolet, or Steve Jobs for that matter, what's the most important thing that you would want the audience or one of them to take away from our comments and our discussion about the future of performance and racing technology? So we're going to start off with you, Dave. What's the most important thing the audience should take away from our discussion today?
As humans, we're competitive, and competitive drives innovation. Innovation is the key to being better in the future. And I think that's a big deal. I mean, it's a competitive world that we live in. One quick comment on electronics and racing. I'm not sure electronics are going to have quite the impact that they do on the average car. That's a little different story. But racing is critical in terms of driving innovation related to autos and our ability to move from one place to another.
Excellent. Kathy Wood from ARC Investment said that innovation will get us past our current economic issues, and the next 5 to 10 years is going to favor today's innovators. So thank you, Dave. So Stefano, what's the most important thing our audience should take away today?
I totally agree with Dave, obviously, and I would like to say that innovation is always, this is what we've seen here in last October at the Speedway. The innovation has put together basically an entire world, from entertainment, from industry, from academic, and from the institutions. So this is what the innovation does. It's not basically work in particularly on specifically to an element or a component of the car that help you to do well or to be more efficient, but it has this particular characteristic that has put, the entire world together, and the people that coming from different sectors of our life. So this is what I want to take away from that.
Thank you, Stefano. So Ricardo, what should our audience have learned today?
I think I agree with Dave and Stefano, evolution, but I think the competition side, right? So as a human being in general, the human being just try to learn to do through mistakes, and the only thing you can do when you made a mistake is just learn from it. Otherwise, you're never gonna go forward. Technology today is actually showing a modern way, but what we as a human being we used to do, right? So in my view is that this is a high-end technology industry that we are all in, but at the end of the day, we are looking for the same thing: competition. As a human being, as your own self, you compete by yourself to be better next day. And that's, I think, the way I see it. When I see all these students developing this technology for the autonomous, they compete into each other. So immediately the level goes to a higher level. That is just put together people to develop something without the competition. So the competition automatically increase, right, the level of intensity. But you do that in your own life, I think, as a human being anyway. So I think we can take this and apply a little bit of this for our own life, and always look for better tomorrow, better than today, and that type of thing, and keep the evolution as a human society, right?
Operate at a higher limit, push the limit. So Doug, you're in turn 4. You're coming up to the checkered flag here. So what's the most important thing you want the audience to know?
Well, I think for all of us, the audience included, we all are part of an industry that's been around for 125 years. And for 125 years, we've focused on leading and solving problems. And I think it just really shows the adaptability of our sport and the fact that we have a platform that can continue to solve problems, not just in 1900 or 2000 or in 2021 and 2022, but I think you will see this sport continue to be the testing ground for automotive and transportation technologies for the next century.
Thank you, Doug. Well, thank you all very much again, all you folks, and particularly honored to have you all on the panel today. You guys have all demonstrated the art of the possible with your leadership and contributions to the industry through the years. So it's an honor to have you, and thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to Francisca and Judy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. What a great panel.
The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and to get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
There are two types of people, racers and everyone else. Racer Magazine is for those who believe that racing is a way of life. Racer embodies the excellence that defines a sport driven by passion, courage, and ingenuity. Get 1 year of both Racer's print and digital edition for only $39 with instant access to our entire digital issue archive. Subscribe now at info.racer.com.